On the map, Operation Bagration is red arrows and broken front lines. For one German Panzerjäger, it was mud, smoke, and pages of a diary that never got finished. Hans Roth served as an anti-tank gunner on the Eastern Front for years. He fought in the advance, in the winter retreats, and in the long trench warfare that followed. By the summer of 1944, his division was still holding a sector in Army Group Center. His earlier journals survived. He did not. When Hans first marched into the Soviet Union in 1941, he believed the war would be short and victorious. The propaganda said it was a preemptive strike. They were told the Red Army would collapse in weeks. By 1944, that illusion was gone. He had seen the winter of 1941 to 1942. He had seen the long, static fighting after Stalingrad. The Eastern Front had turned into what he once called an inferno of endless battles. The quick victories were over. Now every kilometer cost blood and time. In his earlier journal entries, you can feel hope draining away. There are fewer lines about winning the war. There are more lines about surviving the day. By the early summer of 1944, Hans's unit held another stretch of front in Belarus. This time, the Germans were not advancing. They were waiting. They saw more Soviet aircraft in the sky. They heard more trains at night behind the Soviet lines. Artillery positions grew louder and more crowded on the horizon. At ground level, that did not look like a grand plan. It looked like more guns pointing in their direction. Hans's earlier journals describe how tired the men were. Lice, mud, lack of sleep, and constant tension. By 1944, thousands of soldiers like him felt the same. Rumors ran along the trench lines. Another offensive was coming. No one knew exactly when or how big it would be. On the last quiet night before Operation Bagration, the front was not truly quiet. Patrols moved in the dark, sappers laid mines, artillery pieces finished their preparation. A Panzerjäger like Hans might sit in his dugout, clean his weapon, and listen. He would hear distant engines, the clink of rails, the thud of shovels in the Soviet lines. Years earlier, his diary entries had been long and detailed. By now, for many soldiers, the words were fewer. They had already seen too much. Some still believed Germany could hold the line. Others were simply hoping to see home again. At dawn on June 22, 1944, 3 years after Barbarossa began, the earth started to shake. The Soviet artillery barrage that opened Operation Bagration was on a scale many German veterans had never experienced. Forward trenches vanished in dust and fire, bunkers collapsed, and the ammunition dumps exploded. For a frontline anti-tank gunner, there was little to do but hold on. The noise was so great that orders were lost in the thunder. In some sectors, whole gun crews were killed or buried before they could fire a shot. Survivors remembered that you could hardly hear anything except the booming of shells. Smoke and dust turned the morning into a dirty twilight. When the barrage lifted, Soviet infantry were already moving forward. Behind them, tank brigades waited to exploit any break in the line. From far away, generals would later talk about breakthroughs and operational depth. For soldiers like Hans, the first sign of collapse was simpler. It was a runner who did not come back, a field telephone that stayed silent, a neighboring position that stopped firing. As Soviet attacks rolled forward, German companies and battalions began to disappear. Some were overrun. Others pulled back without clear orders, trying to find a line that still existed. Hans Roth's final days are not written down. We know from surviving documents that he was killed during the destruction of Army Group Center in 1944. Any last journal he may have kept vanished with him. Operation Bagration destroyed 28 German divisions and shattered Army Group Center. Hundreds of thousands of German soldiers were killed, wounded, or captured in a few weeks. Historians call it one of the greatest defeats in German military history. Hans Roth's earlier journals survive because he left them in Germany while on leave. They show what this war looked like through the eyes of a single Panzerjäger: belief, doubt, fear, and exhaustion. His story reminds us that behind every broken army group on the map, there were thousands of individual lives. Some left diaries, many left nothing at all. If you want to see how the destruction of Army Group Center looked from above, from the planning tables, the maps, and the shifting front lines, watch the full Operation Bagration episode in this series. Then come back to remember that, for soldiers like Hans Roth, history was not arrows on a map. It was every step, every shell, and every day they managed to stay alive. If you want to follow this whole campaign from Kursk to Berlin, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next battle in this series. Don't stop the story here. Click on the next episode on your screen and keep the Eastern Front campaign moving on your screen.